if we then look at vol, so realized vol, after the crazy swings that we had last week with that 20% rally, it has calmed down somewhat. So the realized vol number on the 10-day still reflects this big jump in Ethereum, but 7-day that leaves that 20% move behind is rolling over to about 60, 70 again. Short dated, realized in Bitcoin is sitting at around 40 something, 40 to 50. So all this stuff's coming in a bit of positive carry back in Bitcoin. Implied weekly is a little higher, and then those 30-day options are even higher. We do have a contango curve. And then we've got this negative carry in ETH, but like I say, it's because it still captures that 20% move in the 10-day calculation. If we were to take that out, that is softer. So implied vols trading down here are pricing in that things are going to get more calm. Remember, implied vols do tend to lead realized vols, and I definitely think that is what's happening here. The short gamma players are probably going to stick with Bitcoin for now, because whilst ETH vols have come in, it's not quite as juicy to sell it. And then if the inflows come in and start ripping ETH higher, you're just going to get run over on that short gamma, and you're not getting paid that much for it now. So probably makes sense for the short gamma players to stay away from ETH right now. The vol of vol has been huge in ETH. What do I mean by vol of vol? You can see here the implieds jumped from 60 to near 100 and then back to 60 again. So that's what we call vol of vol, when the implied vol is so volatile. And for now, like I say, I think there's risk there. If ETH starts to break through 4,000 in a hurry, we may get another bid come back for vol. So I think vol of vol's high. I think risk of being short gamma is high in ETH right now. So I'm pretty much staying away from selling too much ETH vol for now. And then, yeah, as I said, I do think the implieds are leading. Bitcoin's probably the safer play if you want to play from the short side. Obviously, the vol's already been hit quite a bit, but Bitcoin's kind of given up the narrative now, right? So I don't think there's going to be a strong enough narrative for Bitcoin to really do much. Now, if it was to break through the top of the range, which it's been struggling to do, then yes, we may get a bit of a acceleration higher. But until 72, 73K is broken, Bitcoin's probably in a holding pattern, and therefore you probably don't mind being short a bit of premium, basically. Okay, in terms of term structure, you can see here, all shifting a bit lower. The Bitcoin shifting by about, well, apart from that front weekly, you've got quite a parallel shift from sort of June out to September in that 2 or 3 vols. I mean, we did get June down 5 points though. That's quite a big move down in June, and then that back end in March only down 1 vol. So we are seeing a bit of a weighted move, let's say, except for the weeklies, which bounced a little. Bit of a weighted move down in Bitcoin vols, but the real moves came in Ethereum, where that front end got hammered. So about a 20 vol point reset in the front. June down 10. Back end unchanged. So you can see the back's barely moving, but really that front end giving back a large chunk of the spike, if not all the spike that it had last week. In terms of skew, we are seeing skew softening in Bitcoin, so giving up some of its cool premium front end, like weekly first couple of weeks flipping back into put premium, but we have still got about a 5 vol call premium in the back for Bitcoin. And then looking at ETH, that's actually got a bit of a cool bid coming for the front. So whilst they're crushing the vol, they do recognize that the tail risk probably still to the upside on if the inflows materialize. So that the call skew's gone bid. So you can see here 6 to 6.5 vols call skew in the long end on ETH, which is actually higher now than the Bitcoin long end, and we haven't seen that for a while, which kind of shows you where that real longer term bullishness is coming back for ETH. People thinking that if Wall Street was to really embrace Ethereum and its ecosystem and get really crypto friendly, then that's going to drive ETH materially higher. Okay, looking at relative value, it got as high as around 30, 40 vols. In the front end, that's collapsed down to 15, with ETH obviously over. You can see here we got to very high levels, has come back to a bit more normal. Still looks higher relative to the last year, but if we were to zoom out for a few years, you would see that 10 to 15 vols for ETH over was pretty normal back in the day. So I do think we may kind of be in a situation where a 10 vol floor ETH over makes sense, particularly in the short end, if ETH is in the driving seat now in terms of the narrative, right? The Ethereum Bitcoin spot spread has popped to about 0.057. It's got a lot more resistance, about 5% higher at 0.06. That's where it's topped out a couple of times this year. If it was to break that, then that really opens up a lot of room for a real charge, at which point I think Ethereum vol would massively outperform. Now, if alt season is starting, as I said, I think this thing could well find a floor around about 10 vol. So in that back end at 8 vol, I still think it's probably worth owning. Yeah, you might want to be opportunistic and wait to see if we get a calm week and they offer the vol and the overwriters come back. But I don't know. Personally, I'm not convinced. It's that back end seems to be floored at 5, has been floored at 5 for a while. And now that this narrative shift has happened, I think you might struggle to really get much of this spread on sub 10 in anything in the middle of the curve that contains a little bit of gamma on it, basically. So that's kind of the setup. And I don't really see ETH vol collapsing back down to sort of sub 5 anytime soon as a spread to Bitcoin. And then there's the chart on the skew, as we already mentioned. Really, the longer out you go, the more sort of pronounced it is. But Ethereum now trading at a higher call premium than Bitcoin. Bitcoin at around 4 vols there in the 3-month, and Ethereum above 6. So really showing where the options market thinks the tail is now, and they'd much rather pay for that upside convexity in Ethereum, which has taken the baton from Bitcoin, and is massively underperformed, right? If you zoom out, all of that outperformance of last year by Bitcoin has basically left ETH behind. So if ETH's going to catch up, and there are a certain, however billion inflows coming in on these ETFs, as people want to diversify and hold a bit of Bitcoin and a bit of ETH, people may be switching out of Bitcoin ETFs and into ETH in some portion. You might get some Solana flows coming out as well. Now that ETH is in its catch-up phase. All these things may well drive this spread higher. So we wouldn't step in the way of that right now. In terms of Bitcoin as well, the fact that it couldn't break through that resistance, that was also partially why the calls have come under a bit more pressure, people throwing in the towel. I do think the right way to approach Bitcoin is kind of just sit tight, either be short a bit of premium to fund some longs in Ethereum, or just be relatively neutral on Bitcoin, wait for a break of 73K, and then use short dated calls to leverage that move. It's probably better than messing about too much, trying to predict the break, because it's a long time coming. I think the longer it stays in this range, the more violent the break's going to be when it ultimately comes. But for now, I don't see any real point in trying to second guess when that break's going to be. So that's kind of how I'm thinking about it. Okay, those are my thoughts on what I'm seeing in crypto vol. That's the summary for this week in crypto. Thanks a lot as always. I'll catch you guys later.